one can analyze the current system of governance of world affairs by examining three events. The first is the event of the 11th September 2001, which has indeed affected the entire world for almost a decade. We recall that at the time, suddenly the news of an attack on the Twin Towers was broadcast, using numerous footages of the incident. Almost all governments and known figures that mattered strongly condemned this incident. But then a propaganda machine came into full force. It was implied that the whole world was now exposed to a huge danger, namely that of terrorism, and that the only way to save the world would be to deploy forces into Afghanistan. Eventually, Afghanistan and shortly thereafter, Iraq were occupied. Now please take note. It was said that some 3,000 people were killed on September 11, for which we are all very saddened. Yet, up until now, in Afghanistan and Iraq, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, millions wounded and displaced, and the conflict is still going on and expanding. In identifying those responsible behind the September 11 attacks, there were three viewpoints. First, that a very powerful and complex terrorist group able to successfully cross all layers of the American intelligence and security carried out the attack. This is the prevalent viewpoint, which has been supported mainly and advocated by American statesmen. Second, that some segments within the U.S. government orchestrated the attack to reverse the declining American economy and its grips on the Middle East in order to save the Zionist regime. The majority of the American people, as well as most nations and politicians around the world, agree with this view. Third, it was carried out by a terrorist group, but that the American government supported and took advantage of the situation. Apparently, this viewpoint has fewer proponents. The main evidence for this viewpoint links the incident with a few passports found in the huge volume of rubble and a video of an individual whose place of domicile was unknown, but it was announced that he had been involved in oil deals with some American officials. It was also covered up and said that due to the explosion and fire, no trace of suicide attackers was found. Regardless of each of these three viewpoints, there remain a few questions to be answered. First, would it not have been sensible that first a thorough investigation should have been conducted by independent groups to conclusively identify the elements involved in the attack and then map out a rational plan to take measures against them? Second, assuming the viewpoint of the American government, is it rational to launch a classic war through widespread deployment of troops that led to the death of hundreds of thousands of people to counter a terrorist group? Third, was it not possible to act the way Iran conducted the Rigi operations, fighting the Rigi terrorist group who killed and wounded 400 innocent people? In the Iranian operation, no innocent person was harmed. It is proposed that the United Nations set up an independent fact-finding group for the event of September 11, so that in the future, expressing views about it, to ensure that the different views about it are not banned from discussion in the future. I wish to announce here that next year the Islamic Republic of Iran will host a conference to study terrorism and the means to confront it. I invite officials, scholars, thinkers, researchers, and research institutes of all countries to attend this conference. The second cause for the demise of the existing world order is the occupation of the Palestinian territories. The oppressed people of Palestine have lived under the rule of an occupying regime for 60 years, been deprived of freedom, security, and the right to self-determination, while the occupiers are given recognition. On a daily basis, the houses are being destroyed over the heads of innocent women and children. People are deprived of water, food, and medicine in their own homeland. The Zionists have imposed 5 all-out wars on their neighboring countries and on the Palestinian people. The Zionists committed the most horrible crimes against the defenseless people in the wars against Lebanon and Gaza. The Zionist regime attacked a humanitarian flotilla in a blatant defiance of all international norms and kills civilians. This regime, which enjoys the absolute support of some Western countries, regularly threatens the countries in the region and continues publicly to announce the assassination of Palestinian figures, while Palestinian defenders and those opposing this regime are pressured, labeled as terrorists, and called anti-Semites. All values, even that of the freedom of expression, which in Europe and the United States seem to matter so much and are so important, have been sacrificed at the altar of Zionism. Solutions are doomed to fail because the right of the Palestinian people is not taken into account. Would we have witnessed such horrendous crimes if instead of recognizing the occupation, the sovereign right of the Palestinian people had been recognized? Our unambiguous proposition is the return of the Palestinian refugees to their homeland and the reference to the vote of the people of Palestine, all Palestinians, to exercise their sovereignty and decide on the type of government. The third cause for the demise of the existing order has to do with the outlook on nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is clean and cheap and a heavenly gift, which is amongst the most suitable alternatives to cut pollutions emanating from fossil fuels. The Non-Proliferation Treaty allows all member states to use nuclear energy without limit, and the International Atomic Energy Agency is mandated to provide member states with technical and legal support. The nuclear bomb is the worst inhumane weapon and one which must totally be eliminated. The NPT prohibits its development and stockpiling and calls for nuclear disarmament. Nonetheless, please note that some of the permanent members of the Security Council and nuclear powers, i.e. those who hold the nuclear bomb, have resorted to a measure. They have equated nuclear energy with the nuclear bomb and have distanced this energy from the reach of most nations by establishing monopolies and pressuring the IAEA, while at the same time they have continued to maintain, expand, and upgrade their own nuclear arsenals. You may have heard that in the current year, the United States administration has asked for $80 billion to upkeep its nuclear bombs alone. This has entailed the following. Not only the nuclear disarmament has not been realized, but also nuclear bombs have been proliferated in some regions, including by the occupying and intimidating Zionist regime. I would like here to propose that the year 2011 be proclaimed the year of nuclear disarmament and nuclear energy for all, nuclear weapons for none. In all these cases, of course, I admit that the United Nations has been unable to take any effective course of action that has been viable or meaningfully viable. Unfortunately, in the decade proclaimed by it as the International Decade for the Culture of Peace, for example, hundreds of thousands were killed and injured as a result of war, aggression and occupation, and hostilities and antagonism having increased. Ladies and gentlemen, very recently the world witnessed an abhorrent an inhumane act of burning the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran is the divine book and the eternal miracle of the Prophet of Islam. It calls for worshipping the one God, justice, compassion toward people, development and progress, reflection and thought, defense of the oppressed and resistance against oppressors, and it names with respect the previous messengers of God, like Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, and Jesus Christ, may peace be upon all the prophets, and endorses them. They burned the Quran to burn all these truths and good judgments. However, the truth cannot be burned. Quran is eternal, because God and truth are everlasting. This act, and any other act which widens the gap and distances between nations, is evil. We must wisely avoid playing into the hands of Satan. On behalf of the Iranian nation, I pay respect to all divine books and their followers. This is the Quran, and this is the Bible. We pay respect to both books, as both are dear to us.